Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Gosh, we're getting late morning where I am right now on the West Coast. And more than likely, most of you are in the afternoon. So good afternoon. I'm going to give just 30 seconds, 45 seconds for a few more people. I see they're filing in. Welcome to session 3 of our Don't Get Your Tinsel in a Tangle series of presentations today. We've had 2 really good presentations. If you've been attending those, give us some feedback. We hope that you agree. And if this is your first one to attend and maybe the only one for today, thank you for taking the time with us. If you don't remember or hadn't noted, we are going to take a few minutes, maybe 10 to 15 minutes at the most, to have a formal business meeting with you as our members. We're going to vote on the adoption of some proposed bylaws changes. So in about a minute, we'll start our formal meeting. We will have someone that can give an overview of the changes and the process of how we've gotten to where we are for the bylaws uh, proposal. And then we'll take a vote and then we'll close that out quickly. And then we will jump into, I believe on the screen, you are seeing the MIA, Missing in Accessibility presentation that Daniel will be giving this session. So let's see. I don't know if oh, I see somebody asking if they're a member. Am I a member? Um, Daniel, can you see that? And JW Mullahan is asking because the ones that attend that are members will be voting. Mark is
I
checking the roster.
believe
Thank you, Mark. These are
JW has shown up on our roster,
excellent. Hi,
so
Lane.
he should be a member. Hi.
Good morning. And just to introduce, I am Stacy Sire. If you don't know me, I'm the current president of the CSINext chapter. On the screen right now is Lane Booker. He'll be giving some background of what we are voting on this morning. He is the incoming or the president-elect for next year. Daniel, who you just saw, is our not only our presenter today, but our treasurer as well, and one of the founding members of CSINext. And then we probably have a few more on in the background. But with that, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and start the formal meeting. I'm going to call it to order at 32 past the hour, and I will let Thad, our secretary, do what he needs to do for recording attendance.
All right, Mr. Bucher,
Here.
Miss Sire,
Here.
Mr. Hargreaves,
Here.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Mullahan. Yes, and Brian just put it in the chat, so JW, please do the same thing. Mr. Aug, I see you're here. Thank you. I see no other chapter members present.
So
We
how
have
many is
recorded
that?
attendance.
How many is that,
What?
Thad?
That is 6.
So we need 4 affirmative votes to pass. And Daniel, if I could, I'd like to take over the screen if you don't mind.
Nope.
I just want to show the
No, I don't
summary real
mind.
quick. Okay. So here we go. I'm gonna take control. I have to send you a request. Okay. Sharing now. All right. So what you should be seeing is a summary of the changes. So we have also a track changes version that I can show you, which looks like this, and it's pretty messy, but basically we went through this for the past few years trying to make some changes. We also reviewed the sample bylaws that CSI put out, but basically we didn't make any drastic changes. We did add 2 directors to the board, so we increased our number by 2. We are saying we'll have 11 board meetings a year. We also tried to increase the effectiveness of our electronic communication and other things. We have terms of office, 2-year terms for Secretary and Treasurer expiring in opposite years. President-elect and President are 1-year terms. For 3-year commitment, you go through the chairs. Officers can be removed. Treasurer duties have been expanded to file tax forms and payments to IRS and other authorities. We have delineated the election process a little better. We've kind of expanded the nominating committee description. Membership is pretty routine. And there's nothing real radical here. But when you look at the track changes, it's pretty drastic. We did have Hugh Quill, who is the attorney that was recommended by CSI, review our bylaws, and he made some very good suggestions. So we have implemented all of those changes. For instance, he said we did have emerging professionals may serve in any of the elected positions. He said, well, why wouldn't you allow professional members to serve? And it was like, oh, we thought they could. So anyway, it just clarifies some old language from CSI back when Daniel and I were reviewing chapter bylaws for the Institute. So, but like I said, it's pretty routine. The clean bylaws have been posted. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I'm still seeing Daniel's on mine, but that's okay. And what Daniel showed initially was a clean version that's on the CSINext website. And anyway, so are there? I think we need a
Thank
motion,
you.
and
Yes.
then we'll take questions and comments. How's that?
Yes. Is there a motion to adopt the revised bylaws for the CSINext chapter as recommended by the CSINext Board of Directors?
We'll make that motion. I move approval.
Okay, I see in the chat. Oh, okay. I see a motion by Mark Ogg to accept the bylaws as presented. And then I see J.W. Mollahan second the motion. He says so moved. Is there any discussion?
Well, feel free to put things in the chat. I know not everybody can talk.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
And we certainly can turn on mics, turn them on and off to any member.
You can also raise your hand, I believe. I think there's some interactiveness with that. There's my hand.
Yes, Lane.
I don't have any comment. I was just demonstrating.
Right. No, I'm kidding. I don't see anyone typing, and I know this group well enough to know that this is a very verbal group, whether they can talk or type. So I'm assuming, since I'm not seeing any typing going on, that there is no further discussion or concerns.
I will say that the board
So-
members had spirited debate, and sometimes I refer to that as moments of intense fellowship. So we had some good comments back and forth, and Daniel and I argued about how many meetings a year we should have and that kind of thing. But it all works out in the end, and I think we've come up with a pretty good set of bylaws. So,
And I only wanted 32 meetings, everyone.
32 meetings.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a vote. What is the best way to do this? Should we just have those put into chat? All those in favor with your name and say yes. And at the same time, I guess, all
fine.
those opposed, type in opposed. And then we can actually record that for Thad. Oh, I would be, I look like I'm CSINext, but this would be Stacy is an I.
Yeah, and you're the chair, Stacy, so you don't get to vote unless there's a tie.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Daniel.
Motion
All right.
carries.
Well, it looks to me like
Motion carries, Madam Chairman.
thank you. Thank you for everyone's attention to that matter. We appreciate it. So I can go ahead and close and adjourn the business portion of our meeting. So thank you all. I do want to say something on behalf of the board. I haven't even told them this yet because I'm keeping some statistics in the back, but this board does work hard for you guys as members and guests that we do present some good programs and that we make this worth your time. And one of our goals this year has been to increase attendance, which means we are putting on good programs, which means we are worthy of your time, or what we're presenting is worthy of the time. And to date, for this year, we've had so many meetings. I can compare this versus at least last year when I started taking some metrics. And this time last year, for our membership of right around 100, maybe it bubbles up and down from there just a little bit, we had an average attendance of non-board members of about 8 or 9 each. Now, no, 1 month it might be a lot more, 1 month less. Obviously, you know what an average means. But this year already, to date, our average is we've doubled. We're already at 16 non-board members a month. So I just want to take a moment to thank the board and to thank all of you for joining us. So we are not going to stop getting better and presenting good things, which is a perfect segue to our presenter today, Daniel Hargreaves, which you've already seen. And if you've been around any time at all for CSINext, you had to have been influenced by him because he is one of the founding members of this chapter. So I would like to do an introduction real quick. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Daniel Hargreaves, a highly respected architect a while since he's a founding member, which was how many years ago, Daniel?
2009 is when we made the request of the board, and I think November we started quick 30-second history. We started kicking around the idea to construct in the summer of 2009, presented it to the board meeting September. They approved it November, so we've officially been a chapter since November of 2009.
That's amazing. Way ahead of your time, for sure. And you're still instrumental today in not only presenting, but chapter operations, organization, and leadership. Funny enough, you still find time to be a full-time architect, or as his daughter titled him very many years ago, an artichoke. And I'm sure that many of us on this call can relate to that. He joined SRA Architects in 2013. It's a little bit about his architect side. He's played a critical role in shaping the firm's technical expertise as both an architect and PM and the firm's operations manager. He's responsible for developing and maintaining SRA's CAD and BIM standards. You've seen a great change in your career just from technology standpoint, providing CAD and BIM training. That's hurting a lot of cats, and serving as the lead modeler on several major projects. His expertise also extends to accessibility, thus this particular topic today, where he guides both internal teams and clients to ensure thoughtful and code compliant design solutions. So something that looks good and is not just simply functional. Beyond his work at SRA Architects, he's deeply involved in professional leadership. He currently serves as our electronics chair and treasurer, and has previously served as president of the CSINext chapter as well as the Dallas chapter, and president of both South Central and Southwest regions, and as an institute director. We all trust him. We all see him as a trusted advisor, mentor, and advocate for professional excellence. And I'm just going to say, if this were Saturday Night Live and we counted how many times someone has been a repeat host, presenter in this case, Daniel would hold this esteemed statistic by far. His presentations, ADA, are the most requested and highly attended year over year. So please join me in welcoming Daniel. Thank you for being here again, Daniel.
Thanks, Stacy. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see my screen okay. I went to a wired headset to help that. This is registered with the AIA. It will be an HSW. typically at the end of the presentations. When we end the webinar, you'll have a link to go ahead and register your attendance, and we'll get those turned in and certificates sent out. This material is copyrighted, but at the same time, I do post the deck for download in the future. So just some real key things. What we're looking at here is understanding the code versus ADA, the standards, how they work together, and how to implement them into your design and construction. So let's jump right into it. The codes and more. This is probably one of the most misunderstood things about the ADA is it's not code. It's actually civil law, US civil law. So it's at the top of the pyramid. And if you attended Ron Guerin's, this all had its history and start as the Architectural Barriers Act for federal projects, which has been around a long time, and we'll touch on that on the history of the ADA. Now, from a code standpoint, ANSI 1117.1, which is part of the ICC, the International Code, that actually is code which can be enforced by your code officials and so forth. But when it comes to the civil law, the only way to address it is, and depending what state jurisdiction you're in, is by, I hate to say this, filing a civil lawsuit. And then you go through that process. That's the only enforcement. There is no ADA police. You rely on your code official who has, depending on your state laws. And this list is continuously growing. I think when I started this presentation, there was 2 states, California and Texas. California, everyone's familiar with the Title 24. Texas has the Texas Accessibility Standards, which is where my registration comes from. And then I did some deeper dives, Colorado, Kentucky, Illinois, they've got laws on the books now. A lot of the states are filling in, which is not in the ADA, but they're the digital content. Almost there's over 30 states now that have some sort of law referencing digital content. And that's how you present it from websites and accessibility, which not a whole lot of, reference to getting a building built. And then also check your local codes. There may be an amendment to your ANSI 1117. So real quick, the history, this all started back actually 1968 for the ABA, and then section 504 and 73. And then you can kind of see on this timeline, 86, they did an update. 90 is when the civil law, so you can see it took almost 25 years from 68 to 90 to actually take an idea and implement it across the country. And then our last ADA update, it's a little hard to believe, it was 15 years ago. And that actually got in line the ADA, or also sometimes referred to as the ADAG, which is the guidelines, aligns closer with what is in the code and the other publications. So what we're going to kind of focus on today is really an overview, and I want to hit some of the key points that really people get trapped in their designs. So parking, doors, restrooms, kitchens, and then finally signage. So let's kind of talk about the overall. The access board has learned from the other codes, and that's where I was kind of noting that ANSI and the ADA, the numbering of the chapters are very similar. There's a little bit of differences there, but some of those key things in what the chapters are, where each part of the ADA is stored, the differences between tolerances and static dimensions, and then of course the clearances, which there is no just one carte blanche clearance for all that. The ADA is broken into 10 chapters, and let's touch on those. And you can kind of see the breakdown here, very similar to code. Chapter 1, application administration. Chapter 2 is scoping. That always ties back to how do you apply it to your particular facility, whether it's new, existing, or use, very similar to your standard code. What we're going to focus on is chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then not to dismiss the last 4 sections. And you can see here, communication is chapter 7. 8 is your special room, space, and elements. This can be anything from auditoriums to pools to a lot of different pieces of the ADA that just don't cleanly fit in really these 4 key sections, 3 through 6. I think anyone that's familiar with the ADAG, you'll realize that you go through those 4 chapters probably the most, than everything else is really support. But in a whole, everything applies. And then one of the last ones to come up is the recreation facilities. And that goes back to, the implementation and, amusement parks and so forth. So let's kind of take a moment and look at the big picture, a range of dimensions versus the absolute. Range is just that. You'll see kind of in those 2 illustrations up in the upper left of the water closet, one has 16-18 and the other has 17-19. The smaller numbers in the guideline is your metric dimensions. So if you're trying to apply this to, outside of the US, those would be the numbers. Maybe you're working in a construction zone, or, for a US company, but all of your trade is, building it in metric. So that's the convenience there. The absolute is just that, like in that lower illustration, you can see the control wall has a 36. There's no dash, there's no minimum, there's no maximum. It just says 36. That's an absolute. So that means if you're bigger than 36, you're no longer in compliance. If you're smaller than 36, same thing, you're not in compliance. And that's one of the major pitfalls when you see those static dimensions. Well, 36 inches was a minimum. No, it was an absolute. So you have to dimension that in your design element to be 36 inches. So kind of the next part is clearances and reach ranges. And you can see when you get one organization dismissing another, an existing accessible ramp, curb ramp, and the city at some point said we need parking meters and we want them at every 20 feet. And you can see it landed right in the middle of the ramp. So, a post-construction can also create a challenge. But let's talk about those clearances. First off would be your clear floor space. Now I'm basing these on the ADA. Any of you familiar with the latest ANSI? They are increasing some of these numbers, and I do have another presentation on that. But for now, this is the US civil law, and these are your minimums. So you can see here, your clear floor space when, your wheelchair isn't moving is 30 inches by 48. And then objects above 27 inches can extend out from the wall greater than 4 inches. So the idea there is if you're tapping with a cane, anything 27 inches and below, the person, if it's at any projection, so think 2 feet high, something that sticks out a foot, a cane would tap it and they would be able to walk around it. Because always remember, we see a lot of illustrations from the you know, the accessible symbol, a person in a wheelchair, to a lot of the graphics, people in wheelchairs, even the turnaround circle. A lot of that is what it's based on, but there are other disabilities that we're trying to capture, from hearing to visually impaired. And so all of those different elements are applied. You can see here with that reach range, as we were kind of talking about, if something projects out, when you're in the wheelchair, you can see the front approach, you've got 15 inches to 48, and an older ADA on the side approach, they used to allow you to go to 52 inches, another 6 inches higher. I'm sorry, 54 inches. It was another 6 inches higher, but they've, they've now changed that all at 48 is the max for the top. And one of the big pitfalls that I always catch on that in my own construction projects is thermostats. A lot of them are LED these days, and people want to mount them at about 5 to 5'4", which you can tell, you know, at a 4-foot high reach range is out of it, even though it works great for those that are standing to be able to see it correctly. So it's just one of those small elements that usually gets overlooked. Um, and that's where 309 comes into play, that it's saying the operable part shall be at in the reach range, 15 inches to 48 inches. So if you had a thermostat where the buttons were at the bottom, mount that part at 48. A lot of times you'll see where they'll either center it or put the top of it not to exceed out of it. It's just the operable part that is there. And like any other good code reference law, there's an exception, and that's gas pumps. From a safety standpoint, they've found the lowest to be able to put a gas pump is 54 inches above the ground. And so they actually get to be outside of that reach range. So let's kind of talk about parking once again. One organization, i.e. the electric company, wanted their pole right there, and they cut a new hole in an existing parking spot. So always have those coordinated. This is an interesting topic, van versus standard spaces. And you'll see in the code, if you only have one space for your parking, it should be a van space. Van is wider than a typical space. That's 132 inches or 11 feet wide. And then a standard parking space is 96 or 8 feet wide. The reason being is a lot of vans on that side door will have a lift. So the person in a wheelchair may, you know, get out of the driver's chair, wheel back, and then get out on the side of the van. So that's why the extra width there. You'll notice for both of these, whether it's standard or van accessible, that it's a 5-foot aisle. And the idea is, even in a van, you can see in the illustration where the van will park wide and the lift will come out. But even if they park next to it, usually the lift comes out and they can get into that 5-foot aisle. So one of the observations that I've always made is a field inspector is painting that stripe 8 feet wide, because you get kind of, you know, you've got a parking spot, a parking spot, a parking spot, and you're just going to retrofit 2 parking spots, which typically are 9 feet. So you do, you know, a 9-foot and maybe a 9-foot or an 8-foot, or even in new construction, you'll have an 8-foot wide aisle. The problem is when you paint an 8-foot wide aisle, uh, while you've done everything correctly, you've hit the minimum of 60 inches. That 8-foot wide aisle looks like a parking spot, especially as, you know, weather starts to wear down the stripes. And so you end up with a car that is parked on the aisle, so a van can't get out, or for that matter, the person in the car can't swing their door all the way out and get into the aisle. Since my dad has moved in with me this year, and I've been carting him around more and more, that aisle is really critical to be able to get in and out of the vehicle. So always be considerate of that. Don't place an 8-foot aisle, which is an older ADA approach back in the original one from 1990 in that standards. Doors, probably one of the most interesting, complicated, misunderstood part of the ADA, and there's a lot of graphics and charts related to that. This has always been a couple of my favorite photos. They went to every effort inside that restroom to the stalls, the sinks, everything, but with only a 3-foot approach to the door, you actually, once you got in, you couldn't get out of the restroom. Here's another one. They did a accessible parking space, did the 5-foot aisle, and that first part step, good luck in getting up. One of the things to remember about both the standards with the illustrations, they have a disclaimer in the application that the illustrations are for reference only, but the verbal written part of the code is what's enforceable. So the graphics are good, but especially in the older standard, there was some conflicts between the graphic part of it and the written part. So I always go back to deciphering what's written. And the doors, you have a straight on front approach, a hinge side approach, a latch approach, and whether you're pushing or pulling the door. So you can see here, you've got a lot of different applications that can take place just from a single door. The one that you'll see most of the time is, well, I need 12 inches clear on the door, and I've got accessible, I'm accessible. And that's not necessarily true. It depends on your approach. One of the things to remember from a push side front approach, you only have to be as wide as the door to be compliant, unless you have a latch and a closure. And that's one of the key words there. And you can have a closure or you can have a latch. You could still be 0 inches on that clearance. But as soon as you put both of those on a door, then you need an additional 12 on the push side. On the pull side, very typical, the 18 inches. And then you can see, depending on how you are actually approaching the door. The next slide will really show those different approaches to the door. And these are straight from both same illustrations you find in ANSI or the ADA standard. And you can see right there on a front approach, 18 inches. And the idea is that clear space covers the wheelchair, lets you maneuver, lets you crack the door open and back up and move forward and so forth. And that's how you can, progress through the opening with the door there. From a front approach, you can see it makes perfect sense that you can roll right up to the door, turn the handle, and keep on rolling right through. So the idea with that latch closure, and that's this illustration with the red around it, is that door will keep closing and latching before the person can move forward. So that extra 12 inches lets them get the wheelchair at an angle, and then they can unlatch it and use the kick plate to hold it open for a second and then finish getting through the door. And then also, once again, whether you're approaching on the hinge side, and a lot of these conditions may be where the door falls in the room. So on the strike side, and then you'll have those different clearances really depending on the approach. And once again, as I noted before, the pitfall is you've either caught or overlooked. You do a front approach with the clear 36 inches and you've got a latch and a closure, and that 12-inch clearance to the side has been missed. So some of the other elements of a door that can help, and that's identified in the ADA, the closing speed of the door. If you got a closure on it, that last 5 seconds, you actually have to hold that door at 12 degrees. On all your interior doors, you need a pull force of 5 pounds. And ironically, a fishing scale works great for that. And there are accessible tools also for pushing and pulling on doors to see what that force is. The last 10 inches of a door has to be a smooth bottom. And the best example of that is in that illustration there where the door is over the ramp and the door is in front of the steps. But that of a storefront door, if you have a narrow or even a medium style that's under 10 inches, you've got a little lip there, or maybe even more of a classic raised panel door. The reason for the 10 inches, that foot pedal on a wheelchair can get caught on that lip, and then the person can't get through the door. And then vision light. And this is always one of those things. If not every door has to have a vision light, a lot of times you want it to prevent accidents. Maybe it's a high traffic door in a corridor, or between an office space or something. If provided, the bottom sill of that is 43 inches. And I always recommend when you do that, make sure you coordinate the bottom sill of that vision light of the door with the hardware. And a lot of times, from the aesthetics of the door, maybe 46 looks better. Well, remember, if you provided it, you got to be all the way down at 43. A lot of times I find 42 is a pretty safe zone. On these 4 little sections here, the pitfalls, nonstop closing, very common. They don't do that 5-second hold at that last 12 degrees. If you do have a closure, it's very, maybe you have mechanical pressure differences and they keep turning that door closure and you end up with a pull force greater than 5 pounds. Once again, the smooth bottom, as I mentioned earlier, similar to that photo, is you have a narrow style at the bottom of your aluminum door. Now, if you have like a full glass door, like a Herculite, then you're smooth all the way top and bottom. It's not a material, it's just those edges and lips. And then once again, that vision light, if you have a 10 inch by 10 inch, you want that, for your fire stair. And a lot of times you'll center it on the door and center it in the top third. You're going to be well above that 43 inches. Always remember that bottom edge, you need to drop it all the way to 43, which puts the top at 53, which is, from that aesthetic may not be what you're looking for. So I always suggest and recommend from a design standpoint, work with an opening that fits your aesthetic. And as long as you hit that 43 inches, you're good. The last question that I'll get a lot of the times related to doors, and you'll kind of see the illustration there, that push to open. I will have owners that absolutely do not want those, or have owners that want them on every single door. There's nothing in ADA that requires you to have them, But what they do is if you cannot meet all those other clearances, you cannot meet the pull force, anything that might make that door opening non-compliant, this is where the automatic opener is beneficial. It takes all of those out. You could, if you have exactly a 36-inch wide corridor on both sides, pull and push of the door, put an automatic opener on it, and your door is now in compliance. And that's actually stated in the ADA. You can't meet any of those. It is an acceptable alternative to that door. Jumping into the restrooms. The intentions were good. Grab bars on the wrong side. Water closets. Once again, the actual water closet, you'll see ambulatory accessible and then wheelchair accessible. Ambulatory accessible is when you have a greater number of stalls and you place it 17 to 19 inches. But your wheelchair, in here, I have the illustration on a open floor restroom. So once again, that would be your 16 to 18 inches, your clear floor space around it. And that's, you can't place anything inside that clear floor space that is below that 27 inches. There are some, as long as you're within the reach range and out of the clear floor space, and they kind of give you that vertical also. But think of that part of the restroom, that has to be your clear floor space. And then the seat height, 17 to 19 inches and no springs on it. Of course, I honestly haven't seen a spring seat in probably 30 years now. And then a little miss observed is 604.6, which is the flush valve has to be on the wide side of the stall. And you can see in this illustration here that that's what that little red line is. If the flush valve is on the what I call the narrow side of the stall or the narrow side of the toilet, you're actually in non-compliance once again. That's a very common mistake. They maybe the plumber on the project orders, you've got 20 restrooms and he orders 20 flush valves and they're all on the left side, but sometimes the water closet is, on the opposite side and they just install it. The reason you're in non-compliance is if you're in a wheelchair, you can't reach the flush valve, or near impossible to reach the flush valve when it's on the opposite side. Uh, the flush itself, if it's on the incorrect side. And that also works with a tank, that it always needs to be on the wide side. Another pitfall, very common, especially the older standard, water closets. Everybody for the longest time wanted a tolerance. They wanted a tolerance. The older standard was an 18-inch center line to the water closet. And as an inspector prior to 2010, it's pretty easy to fall outside of that, must be exactly 18-inch tolerance. So they've given that to water closets that, okay, that 2-inch tolerance. The problem is if you dimension it as a designer at 18 inches and your plumber is aware that, hey, there's a 2-inch tolerance, you can see it's very easy to be at that 19-inch mark if you're within that too. So what I always recommend is from a design document, if there's a tolerance on anything, give them a static number. In this case, that would be 17 inches, set it at 17, and that gives them the 1 inch back and forth. So if you dimension it at 17 inches and they build it at 19, your leg to stand on is, you know, a design professional was, I said 17, not 19. And then your second leg to stand on is the tolerance of the ADA or ANSI says 16 to 18. And I gave you that wiggle room as a design. And you can put the range in there too. A lot of times if you're working with, you know, Revit and those, it has, or even CAD for that matter, you know, it's a static number that they give you. So I always recommend just pick that static number. The grab bars at your water closet, you've got the sidewall. So you need a 42-inch bar, and then the minimum distance to the leading edge is 54 inches. And then also at the same time, the maximum distance from the corner is 12 inches. So you can actually use a longer bar than 42 inches. And you can exceed those. You can be closer to the wall than the 12. You could be all the way down at 6. But then also remember, if you do that, then you need a 48-inch long grab bar to make sure you hit that 54. So take all those dimensions into consideration: the length of the bar, how far it could be from the corner, the maximum distance from the corner. The back wall is a little different, and this one has changed from the previous. It used to be a static 6 inches from the inside corner, but now that they've put water closets in a tolerance, it's now based on the center of the water closet. So you can see in the illustration over on the right side there that it's based on the center of the water closet, 12 inches to one side, 24 to the other. So that way you always have that maximum reach of that 24-inch. Once again, the grab bar itself, that's a minimum 36 inches. You could put up a 48-inch grab bar, go from corner to corner. There used to be, and I'm pretty sure it's still around, a couple different grab bar manufacturers used to have a continuous. It would start at this inside corner, go all the way to the corner of the room, and keep on going past it. Just remember, if you use one of those, that center mark, you have to be 24 inches beyond it. And the same here when you move forward. So those continuous grab bars, if that's part of your design, make sure that you have the clearances from the center of your water closet that you go beyond that 24 inches. One thing that is an ANSI, and if you're falling under the code, is that there is an 18-inch vertical grab bar requirement. It's not ADA, but it is in the ANSI, and it's under 604.5.1. And you can see kind of on that illustration. Now the numbers I always use is, I call it 40 by 40. 40 inches off the wall and 40 inches off the ground. That falls right in the middle of the two tolerances, even in the ANSI. And then, as I started to talk about earlier, the two major pitfalls: that back grab bar is from the corner of the wall, not the center of the water closet. And then if you do fall under the ICC or IBC for your code, that grab sidebar is missing, because the only code that you looked at, or the only standard you looked at, was the ADA. So that's a pretty common missed item, is that side grab bar, because ADA doesn't have any language related to it. Showers, another one, a lot of static dimensions, but the biggest, you've got two kinds of showers. You have a transfer and a roll-in. Transfer is just that you're in the chair and you transfer to the seat. Roll-in is there's enough room to actually roll in the wheelchair. A static transfer sized shower is 36 by 36. So this graphic is cut off at the top, but it's not a minimum, it's not a maximum. It is 36 by 36. And the idea there is also that transfer distance is from the control wall. So you can see you have that offset to the back, And the reason being is you can see the person there, the wheels of the chair. A lot of times they, will the wheelchair will have an armrest that slides down, and then they grab the grab bars and slide over and then reach and do the control walls. A lot of times that clear floor space will have a straight wall there, and that's kind of the one of the pitfalls. And then also remember that in your clearances, it's floor showers is 36 by 48, not 30 by 48. The clear floor area measured from the control wall, not the seat wall. And then on the control location, not that this illustrates it, is next to the seat, not opposite. So where that's really important is in the roll-in. If you have a seat provided, where you place that control, it can be to the back wall, or the controls are to the seat. Now on a transfer shower, it's small enough because it's only 36 inches wide. You can reach across and utilize the controls. Kitchens versus break rooms. And of course, if you do it right, you'll also combine your restroom. Kitchen and kitchenettes identified in 804. The exception, it is not a kitchen if you do not have a cooktop or a conventional range. That is the main difference. And then once it becomes a break room or kitchenette, you don't fall under a lot of the same requirements of a kitchen. And once again, the major pitfall of that difference is that 30-inch workspace. You need an additional knee space for that. You need, which in a kitchenette or break room, you don't need that additional 30-inch workspace. You're allowed that parallel approach. Kitchen clearances are measured from the counter, not the appliance faces. And basically what that's illustrating, you can see your range may usually they extend out the width of maybe the handle or the door beyond that 24-inch counter. And if you actually swing all the way back to those clearance requirements, if you have 24-inch base cabinets and you want that little the backsplash and the lip, you may have a 25-inch countertop. The problem is in those clearance requirements, a 25-inch countertop exceeds what you're allowed to do for that reach range. So always keep in mind that projection beyond the counter face. When it's a kitchen, storage space shall comply with section 811, which 50% of that storage space has to be accessible. So you have upper cabinets. When you're looking at it, you have to count if you have, we'll keep the numbers very simple. 10 feet of base cabinets and 10 feet of upper cabinets sounds equal. However, upper cabinets may have 3 shelves and base cabinets have 2 shelves. They look at that linear number. One way to get around that, by drawers, and now you either meet or exceed, but then you start taking space out again for a range where maybe you have a hood and an upper cabinet. So look at those numbers, just very simply put. And what I always find, at a minimum, if you have drawers above all your doors, you're going to find, with a single shelf, you're going to find you've got a pretty good linear match of foot per foot of your storage. The cooktop and oven controls, 9 out of 10 ranges, the controls are always over the burners at the back. That's a non-compliance. 1, because your range usually is deeper than that. 2, you're at 24 inches high, so you're expecting to reach over that, just barely hovering above your burner. So that 80462 section requires you to put all those controls on ranges and stoves at the front. Refrigerators and freezers must be within the reach range. So an old school refrigerator on the bottom, freezer on the top does not comply because your freezer is out of that 48-inch reach range. Best way around that is get a side by side, or you can even do a French door, which freezer's on the bottom, refrigerators on the top, because when you open it up, you've got 50% of that refrigerator within your reach range. And then the last one is a microwave hood over the range. It doesn't comply. So if it is a kitchen and you're having to provide a microwave, you need to either put it on the counter or a lower cabinet in the countertop. Talk a little bit about the signage. That this yellow one's always been one of my favorites. And same thing, there's a sign posted outside, wheelchair ramp available, inquire within, but if I can't get up the ramp, how do I inquire? So someone had a good idea solution, but it kind of fails through on the execution. Signage is kind of interesting, and I read in the news that the U.S. Department is changing, which is in kind of violation of accessible signage, but they're changing all standard fonts from a sans serif to a serif font Times Roman. That's actually a pitfall in your signage. So the U.S. State Department is going to be in non-compliance with their own laws. So just keep an eye out for that. But if you have a static word on your sign, office, in this case, library, area of refuge, you have to also provide the Braille. There's standards for the grade 2 Braille, but if it's one of those signs where maybe it's just a static number and then you have an open paper slot, to put the person's name in, uh, you don't have to change the Braille out for that because you've already identified it by a room number, and the number would be in Braille. And once again, that, as I noted before, the pitfall is, well, it's just a number. I don't need Braille. No, if it's a permanent part of the signage, you always have to have the Braille. And then we'll kind of talk about, and then all of the fonts have to be uppercase only. So you can't go very stylized, and they have to be sans serif, no stylized fonts, or even as simple as a Times Roman, which is not very stylized. And actually, if you've ever read long books, and the reason they named it after the newspaper, New York Times, is just that it's a very easy to read font. However, they found in signage, if you have vision impairments, those serifs can start to look like other letters and numbers. And that's why the very simple, very consistent uppercase. Where to put the sign. Um, Always a very important part of it. It actually, you can see the bottom of the sign, 48 inches, and that always, when the Braille is under it, they know where to look for that. You can see the top word, the very maximum 60 inches. So you can't put a sign hanging over a door, because as blind people go looking along the wall and they find the sign. And that's how that's why there's that range of where the signs are actually mounted. And then the other thing is, it's always on the strike side of the, or latch side, I call it strike side, but the latch side of the door is how it's identified in the ADA. Reason being, as soon as they find the sign, then they'll start, they know right within the range of that 18 inches of finding the sign, they're going to find a door latch, or maybe it's a cased opening. So once again, the pitfall is you'll see the 48-inch minimum, the 60-inch maximum, and they'll say, oh, well, I can mount the sign at 60 inches, but always remember how it's identified, the highest lettering. So that pitfall is not the bottom of the sign, but the bottom of the highest lettering on your sign is at 60 inches. Where the sign is placed, sometimes it's on the hinge side, sometimes it's, adjacent to it in an alcove. So where the sign is placed in relationship to that door may be in the incorrect position. And of course, if you can catch your pitfalls in your design, the good news is we get to head to the left for success. If you're following what you think is the correct approach and not back checking all of those different codes from local ordinances to states to ADA. I always hate to say it, but without catching those pitfalls, you're not going down the right path. And with that, there's my old contact information. Some of the resources that I pulled all this information from, the access dashboard.gov. That's a great place for the standards. And then of course there's Title 24, and then the Texas Accessibility Standard. And then as I said, there's about 30 different states now that have some sort of accessibility. And then check your state, check your local ordinances, check your laws to make sure that they haven't added something that may not be in the ADA. And with that, the downstairs toilet is closed, so please use the upstairs one. And there is no elevator.
Thank you, Daniel. There is one question that was posted. It says, I see the 5-pound pull force on the interior doors. If there's a full pull force requirement, is there a pull force requirement for exterior doors?
There is not. It's actually an exception to it. And you'll get a lot of, I would recommend leaning on, from a design standpoint, your building official or your authority having jurisdiction, they may or may not require an operated door on an exterior door. But you don't have to do it for the ADA because they treat exterior doors an exception. The reason being is energy. I always find that one of the catch-22s, energy and having the door, blow open from 5 pounds of force is very possible because you're conditioning your space, but there's nothing that requires an exterior door. I recommend door operators. That way you can do, if you find that 12, 15 pounds of force is what you need to meet keeping that door closed when the HVAC is turned on.
Excellent point. Thank you. I see Lane's hand is raised. Lane.
I have a hand up. Hey, Daniel, I know that your presentation was all about the ADA,
Yes.
but in the code world, we talk about ANSI/ICC. Now we call it ICC A117.1. And I note in the Ohio existing building code, and I assume this is true for the international existing building code, the 2009 A117.1 is applicable for change of occupancy and alterations. So any existing buildings where you're just changing things. And then the 17 edition is applicable for new work and additions. So if you're dealing with the codes, that may be something to realize and get familiar with. And one at 2017 has the larger turning radiuses. Yes. and all that. So important distinction.
Oh, absolutely. And I do have another presentation, ADA versus ANSI. And you're absolutely right, Lane, that the new, I still call it the ANSI, but the ICC 1117.1 is just that. Instead of the 60-inch, it's now the 66-inch turning radius. And the logic there is more of the older population. They're not in the traditional wheelchair. They're doing the scooters, and that's the tightest turning radius of a scooter.
Yeah. Don't tell my boss, Daniel, but I call it ANSI too. So it's hard to
I'm
teach
very old
an
school.
old dog new tricks.
Exactly, exactly. I probably should update my presentation.
All good information. And yes, we've got some big changes coming with those sizes. Just it's already affecting some of our projects as well. Any other questions or comments? Oh, wait, let me see if this one was, oh, this was the question that was already answered. I don't see any hands raised or any other questions coming in. So Daniel, thank you once again for enlightening us, reminding us, exhorting us to good ADA practices. Thank you very much
Yeah,
for that.
I always like to, this is a great little refresher, all those little nuances, applying it to your
Mhm.
project.
Well, and you mentioned how your dad is with you now and you are getting to kind of live this. And I think every design student should have to be paired with someone for a week to really live this and to understand this. We spent the last 3 weeks with my mother here visiting from Oklahoma. And although she can get around okay, we took her on a quick little weekend trip and made her get in a wheelchair for the weekend just because she's having trouble getting around. I didn't want other people knocking into her. And boy, were my eyes opened big time for sure. And unfortunately, we see too much of what you're presenting here along the way. So appreciate your personal sharing there too. Oh, Lane has his hand up again. Yes, sir.
I just want to make another comment. So in September, we went on a cruise with our neighbors, and the wife of my neighbor has a back issue, and she usually uses a rollator. And so her husband was trucking that rollator up and down the bridges of Venice and all these places. And I will tell you that Europe is way behind as far as accessibility in some of the historic places. And like we were up on the Acropolis, and the marble paving is very slick. I saw 3 people fall down. So, you don't think about it here because most places are compliant, but you go to a place that is not even close and it really makes a difference.
Excellent point. We're gonna try to head there next year, so I won't take my mother. Don't tell her that.
It's funny you mentioned that. I see in the chat, are there any ADA type design practices and access in foreign countries? I have to claim a little ignorance. I've been so focused on, the American Disability Act and everything related to that. Brian, I don't know if there is a good standard of practice outside of the US, and if European, Asian, etc., have any standards or guidelines.
The
But I certainly will dig into it, and I think that'll be a good one to add to my running list.
the International Code Council's website has a list of countries where the various I codes have been adopted. Might be interesting to look there and see if any of you have adopted the ICC A117.1 standard. And they may have
David
something
Merrick,
completely different.
excuse me. Thank you, Lane. David Merrick, you have a question?
Turned on his mic. We'll see if he can talk.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I attended a seminar late last week, actually, on Canadian accessibility codes, and their standards are actually just a trifle more rigid than our own. There are many universal design criteria that they've tried to weave into their version of the accessibility code. They have two versions. One is for providences that had already developed their own while waiting for a national standard, and then the national standard that goes everywhere else. So our neighbors to the north are taking our cue from us and trying to improve upon it.
No, that's a great point, David. Yeah, I've explored universal design. I think it is the wave of the future, especially as I think people are living longer. In my own case, that I noted in the beginning, taking care of my dad. You know, the house that I'm currently in was built in 1952, and you can only imagine that. You know, my doors are barely wider than 2 foot 2 inches. So I think across everything, that universal design is definitely a great approach. And if you can start thinking that way, instead of just the bare minimum that's like in the ADA.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions and input. And if there's no others, this will conclude session 3 of 4 for today. We have a little bit of a break between this one and the next one because CSI is giving a presentation at 2 o'clock Eastern time. So we're making sure we're not overlapping them. So that gives us a little break. We will start again at 3 o'clock Eastern time for our final presentation on IECC today. And if you can join us, we would be happy to see you there and look forward to it. Otherwise, thank you for joining us for session 3. And Daniel, again, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Oh, and everybody stay on. Daniel, you want to give your thing about the
Yeah,
not the
real
quiz,
quick.
the
Yeah, so when we end the
certificate.
webinar, you should get um, a link. It'll pop up back on your web browser. You'll get a link. And then just fill out the form. It's a very simple form. I have one set up for each section of today's webinars. If you don't get the link, it's supposed to follow up with an email tomorrow. If you don't get the email tomorrow, simply just visit CSINext.org. And then under About CSI, you will see Webinar Survey, and fill that out. And in the comments, just please note that you attended, part 1, part 2, part 3, or all 4 parts, and we will definitely capture it one way or another. So that's all I got to say about that.
Perfect. Reach out if you have any questions, everyone. Okay, bye for now. See you in a little bit.
Thanks.